Attorney.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question regarding the tangible personal property tax, and it's something that's been touched on by a couple of people, including Mr. Ash. John Bagala is Executive Director for the Center for Community Solutions, and he was actually going to be part of the panel when this was originally scheduled for January, but couldn't be here this evening because of a scheduling conflict. The Center for Community Solutions released a report recently, maybe all of you have seen this, about finding common ground for resolving Ohio's fiscal crisis. And I want to read you an exact excerpt from that report and get your reaction. Quote, an increase of 0.08% in the cat tax would yield about $400 million annually, enough to cover the estimated cost of GRF subsidies to schools and local governments for loss of tangible personal property tax revenue, and return approximately $200 million per year to the GRF. So I guess my question is, does that sound reasonable to you and doable? Any?
I'll start. Why not? I really believe that when you're talking about, again, I believe personally that the cat tax is a more fair tax. I do, obviously, it's a broader-based tax. But as I said before, I would bet that the 0.08% increase would be a much easier increase to swallow in keeping our governmental entities whole as they were originally supposed to be, compared to other local tax increases to offset the losses. So I believe that that would be good.
Let me say a couple of things about that. One, House Bill 66, this is kind of an interesting element of it. Originally, we didn't know how much the cat tax was going to bring in. And so they had a trigger mechanism that said, if the tax brings in 10% more or 10% less than we project, the rate is automatically going to be revised so that it brings in as much as we expect. This was a new thing. Nobody knew what it was going to produce. Well, unfortunately, the General Assembly, the next General Assembly, took out the upward trigger. And wouldn't you know that, in fact, the cat tax has been delivering more than 10% less. Last fiscal year, I think it was 14% less. So if that trigger, which was in the original tax reform, in other words, this is what was in the tax reform that so many people have said that they want to continue, if that were reinstated, we would have more than $200 million a year in the General Revenue Fund that would make up for the loss, maybe about half of what we just said in that proposal. But it would still be, and I think it would be done in a way that people who supported that original legislation would not be, in fact, making any change in what they had originally voted on. I think the other point to make about this, if we take that proposal that you mentioned, we've looked at the share of taxes that are paid by businesses and individuals in Ohio, and how has that changed? And the Ohio Manufacturers Association did this about 10 years ago. We merely updated some of their work, or rather they sponsored a study by actually Nan Baker from the State University. And what they found, and what we've found since then, updating it, is that the share of state and local taxes paid by business in Ohio has declined from almost 40% in the late 70s to less than 30% today. So if you did what you just described there, we would be nowhere near what the business contribution was as a share of the total back more than 30 years ago when our economy was a lot better than it is now.
I think you're speaking to John's report from the Center for Community Solutions. Is that what you were asking? And it is too bad that John could not be here, because he speaks very eloquently to that proposal. And I won't do justice to it, but I think what he was advocating, his group was advocating, was really a balanced approach to dealing with the budget issue. Obviously, there were going to be reductions. There were going to be reductions in Medicaid, on the prison side. Schools were certainly going to be part of that, but they were also advocating for some look at the tax code. And I think he was also talking about not necessarily tax increases, but really taking a look, and I think Rich alluded to this earlier, get into the tax code and things that should have been sunset long time ago that should be collecting some taxes that were not, and a combination of that would be part of the solution. So, you know, that is something I think we still have to talk to the legislators for. I understand their position that they don't want to raise taxes, that they feel there's a detrimental effect to that as we kind of move forward. But it really then forces all of the decisions to be on the reduction side for everyone in this room. And unfortunately, you know, we become the mechanism for raising the taxes because our only mechanism is to make the cuts to some extent, and then we still have to deliver the program that the community expects, and then we're back on the ballot. So, you know, you can say we're not going to raise taxes, but you know, I know school districts are struggling with having to do that. You know, I think the piece that I walked away with that John had said, and he would say this if he was here, and you know, he believes, and you know, this is the social service piece, which is their organization, that education is the greatest hedge against poverty. And that's why they were supporting the lessening of cuts on the public education side, because they know if you harm public education in this state, you're going to force more children into poverty, create a bigger problem down the road that the state will eventually have to take care of. And he was advocating really a more balanced approach and really less cuts on the public education side. I know I didn't do it justice, and John would do a much better job of that, but that, I think that gives you a little gist of what they were advocating.
Let me just add that I happen to believe there's no such thing as a good tax. I don't care whether you're talking about property taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, CAT, whatever you're talking about. However, the CAT becomes a fairer tax because it's a lower rate on a broader range of services and products. Okay, it's on all commercial activity except for those involving financial institutions. So therefore, the broader the tax and the lower the rate, it probably does make it a little better. But I want you to look at the big picture for just 1 second and kind of back up. Okay, the commercial activity tax does one other thing. You remember the comments that were made earlier about how high Ohio's local tax burden is, whereas its state tax burden ranks fairly well. What this does is it shifts the burden, okay? Because the CAT is not collected locally. It's collected by the state. And so I think part of the notion was that if you reduce then the tangible personal property, which is a local tax, but increase the CAT, which is a statewide tax, then you have adjusted that distinction somewhat. I still, though, am of the opinion and concur with some of my fellow panel members that I think we may need to we need to revisit the rate on the CAT. Whether it's a phase-in, whether it's something that we do, we don't want to stifle the growth of business. But by the same token, right now the CAT is not doing exactly what it was designed to do.
All right, I guess last word is somewhat. And I certainly agree, and I'll take back with me some of the suggestions that were made on the CAT tax. I will have to say, though, in looking at the broader picture of things, we could fill this room with those that are advocates for hospitals and Medicaid and nursing homes and prisons. I mean, everyone at the State House and who we talk to every day is suffering from all those areas. That's why everything's on the table, because everyone is going to be impacted by this deficit that we're all going to be facing. 2 years ago, the stimulus dollars plugged all the holes, and we made some cuts that were painful in some areas, but for the most part got through a budget cycle. We are now looking at no stimulus dollars, and we are back right where we were 2 years ago, with even more to have to overcome, because we have over a $2 billion deficit in what we've supplied for unemployment funds. So, you know, I myself would rather, instead of trying to find different places to try to increase taxes or try to find place to increase fees, and we did a lot of that in the last budget cycle. If you're late for your license, if you go fishing, anything that you're going to do that requires a state license, you better not be late, you'll probably pay more. That is also an increase in tax. I would rather focus on what it is we need to do to bring revenue back in the state, and that is to bring jobs. That is to retain, create, and bring them here to Ohio. That, as I said, I can say it till I'm blue in the face, that is my mission for as long as I'm there. I would rather work on trying to bring revenue in the state than trying to find different ways to try to increase taxes or try to find ways to find fees that we can try to increase revenue that way. Because the only sustainable solution here in Ohio is to get people back to work. The unemployment that we're paying right now, the billions of dollars, is killing us. The interest that we owe on that is also hurting us. The people that are out of work or underemployed or are stuck looking for jobs, that you all know who they are. They're family members, they're neighbors, they're friends, they're our kids. We've got to get those people back to good paying, sustainable jobs. And that's what we're working on, I think, just as much as trying to find ways to either increase ways of cat tax or increase more fees or whatever it is we need to do today to solve the problems. We need to look forward to find out what it is we need to do to bring the revenue that we have lost. And the whole country is really facing this recession. It is not just an Ohio recession. We are lagging and coming back. We need to come back quicker than we are. And I think that we can do that. We have a lot of things in this state. I think we have assets that we don't sell well enough, we don't market well enough. We have wonderful universities and medical centers, and fresh water, which we don't play up enough. We have a lot of things that we can build from to bring those jobs back here and get those that are here to stay and expand. But it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take all of us together, and this is not, education is not the only thing on the table. There are those very, those people that are out there serving other people, that elderly and food banks, and we've put more money into food banks. It's at an all-time high how much we have had to supply, because there are more people that are needing to live and to eat than ever before. So, I guess I will leave you with that. I hear what you're saying. I will take that back with me. But we also need to think about all the others that are out there and all the others, as I said, we can fill this room in their advocacy for what it is that they do and what they think needs to be done in order for them to survive. And all of that is on the table, and that is why. And I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thanks. We've been going for about an hour and a half, so what I'm going to do now is, and I apologize for that, we thought we'd be a little bit faster than this, but it's been just a great discussion. I'm going to do a rapid fire. We're going to ask a question. Every school district, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand and I'll come around. Everybody on the panel has had an opportunity to answer the question. One person will take the question and we'll move this around real fast in the next couple of minutes. I got the first question. Who wants it? Collective bargaining. How, as a school board, now phrase it this way, how, as a school board member or school district, how is that going to benefit me to do collective bargaining? For what?
As a most former superintendent, I guess, how would it help? Well, I think what's on the table now is an expansion. It is kind of a ying back of management rights, and I think that I would say to be cautious too about what levels of management rights are coming back and how